Welcome to Rising Together, a podcast on the art and design of inclusion. I'm Dr. Elson Haskolar.
And I'm Curtis Anderson.
Each month, we'll have a special guest, and we'll learn from their personal stories and experiences about how to create change. From thought-provoking discussions to real-life strategies, we'll explore the transformative power of inclusion and discuss how to create a world where every single voice matters.
We hope you can join us as we dive into the art of creating inclusive communities. Let's embark on this journey of transformation, one story at a time. Stay connected, stay engaged, and more importantly, keep rising with us.
I would just say, just keep working hard. Be nice to people. Be humble. There's a lot of, and be kind. Like that's like a really big thing overall. And just treat people how you want to be treated. It matters so much.
You can catch the latest episodes of Rising Together on the first of every month on Spotify, YouTube, or your preferred streaming platform.
Welcome to another episode of Rising Together. And today we have Paul Gonzalez here in the studio. Paul graduated from Ringling College with a degree in graphic design and has gone on to make waves as a creative director and an entrepreneur. He's the mastermind behind Studio Black, a designer firm based in New York City. Welcome to Rising Together, Paul.
Thank you for having me. It's a
and
pleasure.
welcome back to Sarasota, and welcome back to Ringling College.
Yeah, I'm here very often, crazy enough, because I have a home here. So like, but I've seen Ringling grow over the last 12 years I haven't been here. It's been quite a journey.
We go way back, right? We were just talking about how long it's been since we've graduated. But for our friends and family who are watching and listening, can you you started to go a little bit just now, but can you roll back a little bit and tell us a little bit about who you are?
So I grew up here in Sarasota. I'm Puerto Rican and Ecuadorian. My dad's from Puerto Rico, my mom's from Ecuador. It was very interesting growing up in Sarasota. I was one of the very few Latinos I know. I grew up in a nice, a beautiful suburb. So that heavily influenced, I was around a lot of great friends, and so that heavily influenced who I was, and having great family, having great food. As I grew up, and so that's pretty much a little bit about me and my background. As you're saying, what I do now is I'm an entrepreneur. It's kind of weird to say that, but during the day I own a design agency, and then at night I'm a part owner and I'm a professional salsa dancer, which is also wild to say, because if you were to tell me in college you'd be a professional salsa and owning a dance school in New York, I'm like, shut up. No.
That's amazing. Because I know that your mom, like my mom, was a fashion designer and a tailor. And then so when you were a little kid, you were helping your mom make pillows and dresses and all kinds of things. And I remember my mom making all sorts of very fancy outfits for us, Yeah. So I want to know if those years really influenced, your interest in art and design. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would say that definitely probably came into about. So as a child, I used to just play with friends outside and but my mom is a tailor and fashion designer, so I used to help her make stuff, and I didn't know it at the time, but she always customized things, and so actually making things and customizing things were a building block, I think, to design. From a young age, from fabric to I can do whatever I want. One of the coolest things I think that my mom ever did was when I was doing my first communion, or confirmation, I don't know what it's called, but and so she gave me a catalog, and she's pick whatever suit you want, and I got to go and just flip through it and be I like this, I like this, I like this. So I got to design it with her, and she we went to the store and picked out the buttons and the fabric. It was amazing. I loved it. And I didn't know I would ever do design. I didn't know what design was until high school, really, until late in high school. So I always knew I liked making things, but the idea of design never came until later in high school. I didn't know it was a profession. I knew Very crazy though, I had an eye for design from a very early age. And I knew it. I just didn't know it was design. I just like, that looks good. Or like, that looks awesome. Or like, that looks unique. I had the eye from a young age, but I didn't know how to describe it. And I think Ringling I think that's one thing that Ringling taught you is that like, I learned how to talk about design expressively through words and all that across the board. So
there is this something so it's like a pleasing to the creative senses where you just take something flat fabric and then you can mold and warp it and it becomes this 3D like this garment that you can wear. And then once that technical aspect kind of gets like established, then you can start to infuse some creativity, storytelling, and this is what I would want to, how I want to customize it, and this is what I want to say. So, I mean, I think that's really cool that you kind of just felt that initial like creative push before you even decided the design was where you wanted to go.
I still I come back for my mom altering things all the time. Like I came back with like one of my dance outfits. I'm like, I need this tailored. So yeah.
So I think that's you said something about being an entrepreneur that I'll come back to, but you, like hearing how you, like your upbringing and your mom and your dad, like it's like tell me about these cultural experiences and how they've shaped who you are, like, and how that's almost changed since you've got your, hit the boots running with design to where you are now as an entrepreneur, business owner, design studio owner.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a Puerto Rican in this country, you're really like very Puerto Rican. Like it's a very big thing to being Puerto Rican and part of being Puerto Rican culture, and also Ecuadorian as well. It's less like I think Puerto Rican, like growing up in a Puerto Rican in Ecuadorian household, like a lot of the values are taught through community and like family and like growing up with a lot of family around, and so that itself has a lot of the values have gotten larger even through my businesses, and like just overall, like, and I think like that's it's an awesome question just because like I think like in my overall theme of life in both businesses is like I've learned that they're not really cool. I'm like awesome like having these businesses, but I feel like for me and who I've become and like as like a Latino Latinx person is that like I'm trying more and more nowadays to like change the perception of how Americans see Latinos. It's a very big thing for me. It's huge, and it's very like, and it's in Kukala, which is my dance company, and also Alt Black. Also, we renamed. It's not Studio Black. It's Alt Black.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's such a big thing for me. Like, and I think that's why I have such amazing employees that stay with me for years. Is that like I treat them like family. Like I don't pay myself out as much as because I want to invest in them and like help them, and like it's such a big thing. Like I have yearly retreats where I pay for everything, so like they just have to come and like like we just spend time with each other. It's very like it goes back to family. Same thing with like my dance company. We have like monthly like like get-togethers. We go out, we eat together before performances. Like even our yearly anniversary, which is happening in 2 weeks. Is we're gonna have a huge band, like 10 performances, like it's so all cool. Gonna be free. It's very community driven. It goes back to like how I grew up, having barbecues, getting together, having fun, dancing an hour.
And it's important to note, like as you're saying, you left here as a junior designer and you advanced. That wasn't like a full-time job. Like this was you banking on yourself, and we can talk about you as an entrepreneur, but like freelancing. Through and through until you decided to start your own business. So that's even more so, a lot of people could probably lose, like maybe I can yield or I can, conform to something to like your cultural roots kind of just led you, family first, community oriented. Mm-hmm. Even as a freelancer, you got to really double down on that. Like this is who you are. And that's part of like the Paul Gonzalez brand.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
One of the last things is like, as I've learned through both these businesses, like I think my overall goals change the perception of how Americans look at Latinos. Normally here in the States, and so working high, like getting high, like higher positions, like at Amazon or like all these like places where I worked, like RGA and stuff like that. I learned, I saw the leadership, and I was like, no one's Black, no one's Latino, and so I knew I didn't know it yet. But I always knew, coming out of college, I always knew I wanted my own company, my own firm. And I saw it and I was like, oh, I kind of want to make an agency that's like Latinos or minorities focused. And so that's like my overall goal, which I've learned is that I'm trying to change that perception for Americans that like Latinos can also perform at a high level, and change that perception because like the majority of like the jobs that Latinos have are waiters, cooks, we're like, mechanics, mowing lawns, like we're very like work driven across and so like that's like one of my biggest goals is like changing that perception with using the values of Latino, which is like community and love and like food and of course food.
That's awesome.
And dancing. Yeah,
I know, I love the food. Yeah, we're gonna come to dance in a little bit, but I want to learn a little bit about those years when you were interning. So I guess you had an internship in New York City, right?
Yeah.
And then you came back and graduated from Ringling College and then packed up everything, went to New York City to do some freelancing, right? So tell us a little bit about those years when you did some freelancing and some of the things that you learned before you were able to, create your own startup.
It is, that's a wild story. So like, once again, I feel like I just got lucky in my internship. I had a class here, and I was just designing next to this amazing designer, Tommy, and he was. I just remember being like, this guy's so cool, like and
Tom
so
P?
yeah,
Tom P?
yeah, Tom
he's
P.
cool.
Yeah, he's an awesome dude, and he graduated, and I was looking, and he was already working for an amazing design agency called High Res. And I just he like posted something about internship and I was like, yo man. So he recommended me, I got it. And I just went to this internship in New York. My grandma lived there. I stayed with her in Yonkers for like a month or two, like 3 months. And I made this crazy commute from Yonkers to like Tribeca. And it was such a culture shock for everything. One of my first website ever in that, like helping Tommy and that crew, which is that crew was incredible.
Yeah.
Like I have never worked with such it kind of sucks when you're working with such a high level people and then it kind of goes down as like that's how I felt like through like my career is that like I never got to work with such cool people again. Like like here and there, yes, you work with individuals that are just as great and cool, but like everybody in that studio was just like amazing, and very like experimental and like. And so I had a lot of culture shock even with like I got to work on Helmut Lang site. That was like one of my first projects and very innocent Paul, like working on this and like, I'm just like, hey guys, I'm working on like a product page. I'm like, hey guys, when are we going to change these prices? They're a lot. And they look at me and they're like, those are the prices. And I'm like, oh my God. I just didn't know anything about fashion. Like even though my mom's like, that was like high-end fashion. So like, I didn't know that Helmut Lang was a name. Like so like, so coming out of that internship, I come back to Ringling and, we start interviewing for like roles and stuff. And I actually got a couple roles in Silicon Valley. I had like 3 job offers and I was like, I'm not doing that. I want to go to New York. Cause like I was just so influenced by New York at the time. Cause I had that Tribeca thing and I was like, I'm going to New York. And so I was really burned out at Ringling. Like I really, like my senior year, I freaking like, I really tried really hard, to the point I burnt myself out, and then I took like 3 or 4 months off, did nothing, and then when the school year started coming to the start here, I'm like I can't be here, so I'm like all right, I want to move to New York, and yeah, I just moved up to New York with no job, even though I had opportunities in California, and I was like I'm just gonna go freelance, and so hit the ground running, like like I said, I just got lucky. I started working for Interbrand, RGA, these large companies that like were like, yeah, come on. Like I had like the work from High Res and like I had a great book from here because like we prioritize portfolios here, and so like I just got very lucky and like
Yeah.
So you went to Ringling College, right? You studied graphic design. So I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about those years at Ringling College, what you learned, and then how, it made you become a successful graphic designer, creative director, and an entrepreneur, maybe even a salsa dancer.
I loved coming to Ringling. As I said, like I worked incredibly hard. I was like a grinder. I always worked so much. I met my incredible friends that I'm still friends with in New York. I'm still very like friendly with like everybody I went to school with. And yeah, I think some of the things I learned at Ringling is like learning how to learn, how to adapt. Even during my time here, like the teachers would change the whole curriculum because they saw the industry was changing. So they're like, you don't need that skill anymore that you learned last year. We're learning something new, and because it's where the industry is going. And so I learned how to change and adapt very fast overall. And yeah, and once again, like, I leaned towards more the international people when I was here. Like, my crew was very international, from like Bosnia, Maldives, like Pakistan, like all these, Vietnam, like this, like growing up here in Sarasota, there wasn't that much diversity, but like because Ringling had this like very diverse international crew, I don't know why, like I just like gravitated towards them, and so like I hung out with them, and so I learned a lot about the world, like geography, like I didn't know what even Uzbekistan was, like, or all these countries, like, oh wow, and I learned about their culture. They made food, I made food, like it was like this amazing experience.
That's cool.
And yeah, across the board, like it was a lot of fun learning about the world, even with the people I was around here. And yeah, I think, and I was saying before too, the things I learned, like a lot of the groundwork was like making clubs. Like I made something out of nothing that like
Still around. Type
It's still around.
Type
Yeah,
Club.
I made a club that's still around today, 12 years later. I'm like shocked.
What club is that?
Type Club.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I made it with like, it was like 3 others. It was Drew Rios and Fernando Rosales. Like, yeah, I'm still so shocked.
Yeah.
It's amazing though. I love seeing that, and it makes sense for the department. It's still around, and like, yeah, I knew coming here, I was like, I have to do everything I could. Like, in dancing, it's called like squeezing the juice. Like you want to, like, like you're trying to like be making movements as much as you can, so you can show the world. And so like for me, I just worked super hard to like do as much as I could here, so that like you put in what you get out, or you get out what you put in overall.
Yeah.
And so I did that here, and
Yeah. And look at you now.
I know. Because I always compared it to my parents, and I was like, I just felt so uncomfortable. They were so proud of me. My dad was so proud. He's like, yeah, like my son's doing, yeah. But like, it just incredible shame. It's very funny. Like I just like, but yeah, and it took me years to get over it.
I feel the same. Sorry.
What was your metrics of success as it pertains to like being like a Latino? Like if your parents, if like you say you made so much more money than them, so then like once you were reaching that threshold, was it hard to see what success looked like in the realm that you were in as a Latino, or like, because
success is a funny word, man. Because
Right.
like I don't think even now I'm successful. Like I can objectively see, oh, Paul, you're doing so great. You have multiple companies. They're doing great. They're all profitable. But like, I don't know if I see the world like that. If like, oh, it's like you're success. For sure, I get it. But I think success for me is like doing what I'm doing now. I guess I like is that I'm very lucky. I get to spend the time I do with my family. I get to help others in the community, and I get to empower others through the businesses I run, especially minorities and Puerto Ricans, Latinos, everybody. Like, and I think that is what success for me. And I just want to push that.
you said something in your intro that I found so like really intriguing. Like you said, like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, but it feels weird to even say that. Like, what does where does that stem from? And like, where did you start to see that shift where it was like super foreign to like, I can start to like walk and talk like I'm an entrepreneur?
Schools don't prioritize businesses, like in the sense of like learning how to be a business. I always wanted to make my own firm, but like it was never that. And even as a freelancer, you are your own business. And so like you had to navigate these very hard conversations of like money. And New York is like, you like the hourly rate got really high really fast for me. It went from like I'm making $30 an hour to like I'm making 90 to 100. And that was very hard for me to say. Like super hard for me, like, hey, I'm worth 100 an hour as a freelancer, 125 an hour. And I wasn't comfortable for years saying that. Like
Hard
I was
for you or hard
for me.
hard for you to say to yourself or
No.
hard for you to say to like an employer?
Both. It's both.
Yeah. Okay.
And so like and so like that itself as like a like and this all goes back to business. And so like it's hard to say that because like for the entrepreneur because of like things like that. It's not learned and taught. Like it's also, you know, it was a very big learning curve overall, and literally I had to practice saying like 125 an hour, 125. I literally had to like practice it probably like 100 times just to be like to make it sound so easy and so smooth that like, you know, it's like a normal day, you know. And I have to do that with my own business now too, because the running contracts for my firm is like between, you know, 15 and 30,000, and so like, you know. But most of the time too, we get larger projects like in the 50 to 100 range. And so like now, like I'm used to saying that now. So I'm like, it's like no issue, but like it did take time. And a lot of that comes from my upbringing where like, you know, as a freelancer, I was making more in a month than my parents made in a half a year. And I felt so uncomfortable about that. And like, it was like this very like wild, I'm like, I never made so much, like, it's just wild to me that I made so much money, and I also, like, didn't feel like, I also didn't deserve it. Like, I was like, it was weird. It was like, I know I'm skilled in this and that, but, like, it was just a wild feeling. And I'm just like, but I took it, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do all the goals I wanted to. You know, pay debt, pay my parents' house, like that. I had all these goals, and, like, I was like, achieve these goals. And so
like a sense of like imposter syndrome that was being forced
Yeah.
out of you. Like you couldn't keep it around because you were doing these things.
Exactly.
We talked a lot about everything: imposter syndrome, challenges, being a Latino, the importance of community and people, and how you're infusing your cultural background right into your work and the companies that you're creating. If you were to give one piece of advice to our students, what would you like to tell them?
Just fail and work hard. That's it. And just be a nice person. That's really it. Like you're gonna get far with just probably one of those things. Like if you add all those three, that like, you know, I think you'll be successful overall. Like I know people who like are just great people and like they've gotten so far just because of that. They might not even be great designers or great, you know, workers. But like because of who they are, they're just incredible employees. They become great managers and like they go high up, become VPs. And like, it's just, you know, I think in the world of art and design, like it's not like a direct row. It's a zigzag and you have to figure it out, and things change all the time. Like all the time, especially now with ChatGPT and like all this and that. Like it's just and just like AI, like overall, like I got to give a lot to Ringling overall of like learning how to learn here, the people I've met, and like it's just because it's still every day I use all the skills. But yeah, I think for the students, work as hard as you can in and out of school, fail as much as you can, because that's what I did. And a lot of those learnings, even here, like the groundworks was for what I'm doing now. Like even here, like Curtis, as you know, like I made clubs. So I was making like little, and what I learned was like, those are like little companies. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, and so, yeah, I was like, and so like, I was already making the groundworks of making something in the real world. And so just fail. If you don't know what you want to do, just keep failing. Know what you don't want. That's easier than not just being like, I don't know, maybe I want to do this. But like, just work hard, treat people great, don't burn bridges. Yeah.
So, any final thoughts?
I just say, just keep working hard. Be nice to people. Be humble. There's a lot of, and be kind. Like that's like a really big thing overall. And just treat people how you want to be treated. It matters so much overall. And yes, we're very preoccupied of what we do for our living because that's our livelihood, and we invest a lot into college. And but it's only going to be in 10 years from now, probably for all students, it's not just the only thing you do. It's one of the things you do, and you'll be a whole different person in 10 years. And so, later in 10 years, you can hit up somebody 2 weeks before an interview and be like, "You want to come on for an interview?" I'm like, "Sure."
Yeah. Shout out to Paul for answering my text message.
At like 2 a.m.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of Rising Together podcast. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Thank
bro.
you.
And that concludes today's conversation. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on this journey of design and inclusion. You can find all of our episodes, transcripts, and other wonderful resources on our website, ringling.edu/rising together. Join us next time for more insightful conversations. And remember to stay connected, stay engaged, and keep rising together with us. Rising Together is produced at the Soundstage in partnership with Studio Labs and Art Network at Ringling College of Art and Design. The show is produced by Dr. Elson Haskaller, Curtis Anderson, Nick Paldino, Troy Logan, and Marquis Doyle.